Tonight, when 2 a.m. finds you wide awake, you'll probably blame your phone, or your coffee, or stress. You'll lie there assuming something is broken in you. But the real answer is far stranger than any of that. Your sleep was never supposed to be one solid, unbroken block. For most of human history, waking up in the middle of the night wasn't a malfunction, it was the plan. Think about your last bad night. You fell asleep around 11. You woke up near 3. Your heart wasn't racing, you weren't anxious yet, you were just awake, lucid, strangely calm before the panic set in. And you assumed something was wrong. What if nothing was wrong at all? For thousands of years, humans didn't sleep the way you do now. They slept in 2 distinct chunks, separated by an hour or more of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night. Historian A. Roger Eckertz spent over a decade combing through diaries, court depositions, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe. The same phrase kept surfacing over and over in documents centuries apart. First sleep, second sleep. People would drift off for several hours after dusk, wake naturally somewhere around midnight, stay alert for a while, and then sink into a second sleep that carried them to dawn. What did they actually do during that gap? They prayed. They talked quietly with a spouse. They tended the fire so it wouldn't die out before morning. They visited neighbors who were also awake. Some simply lay in the dark and let their thoughts wander, undisturbed, unjudged. This wasn't insomnia. It had a name. It had a rhythm everyone understood. Nobody panicked about it. Nobody reached for a remedy. It was just an ordinary feature of the night, the same way hunger was a feature of the day. Court records from the period back this up in small, telling ways. Witnesses describing events after midnight didn't say they had been woken up. They said they were already awake, sitting by the hearth, somewhere between their first sleep and their second. Physicians of the era wrote about that hour of wakefulness as something useful, even valuable, a quiet window for reflection or conversation, not a problem to be medicated away. Imagine a doctor today writing that down as advice. It sounds almost backwards, but for hundreds of years it was simply common knowledge, passed down the way we now pass down advice about 8 hours and a fixed bedtime. So why does waking up at 3 a.m. feel like a crisis now? Because somewhere along the way, you were taught that sleep is supposed to be one single, unbroken stretch, 8 hours, lights off to lights on, like one uninterrupted scene with no cuts. That idea is shockingly recent. Eckertz traces its disappearance to the spread of artificial light, beginning with cheap candles and oil lamps in the late 17th century and accelerating hard once electric lighting reached ordinary homes by the end of the 19th century. Light pushed bedtimes later. Later bedtimes compressed the night. The gap between first and second sleep simply got swallowed by the clock. Here's where the story gets stranger, though. You might assume that if segmented sleep was the ancient default, then hunter-gatherer societies today, the closest living approximation of how your ancestors actually lived, would still sleep this way. They don't. Not exactly. Neuroscientist Jerome Siegel and his colleagues at UCLA strapped sleep tracking devices on members of 3 modern hunter-gatherer and forager horticulturalist groups, the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Chimane of Bolivia. These are communities with no electricity, no clocks, no glowing screens telling them when to feel tired. If anyone on Earth should still be sleeping the way your distant ancestors slept, it's them. The results, published in 2015, surprised almost everyone who read them. They didn't sleep in 2 distinct blocks. They didn't sleep more than people in wealthy, industrialized countries. On average, they got around 6.5 hours a night, less than most modern sleep guidelines recommend. So which is it? 2 segmented blocks or 1 continuous stretch? The honest answer is neither, permanently. It depended. It depended on the season, on temperature, on whether there was a fire that needed tending or a sound in the dark that needed listening to. Sleep, it turns out, was never one fixed pattern passed down unchanged through the ages. It was flexible, responsive, built to bend around whatever a particular night demanded of you. That flexibility is the real inheritance sitting inside your biology right now. Not a rigid schedule, not a guaranteed 8 perfect hours. A nervous system engineered to wake up when it needed to and slip back under the moment the coast looked clear again. Which brings us to the question you've actually been asking your ceiling at 2 a.m. Why does your brain still do this when there's no fire to tend and no predator circling outside? Why does it keep nudging you awake in the dead of night, tens of thousands of years after the last genuine threat that required watching disappeared from your life? Because your brain doesn't know the threat is gone. It only knows the pattern. For nearly all of human evolutionary history, falling into total unguarded unconsciousness for 8 straight hours was a genuinely risky strategy. A human lying motionless in the dark for that long was an easy target for a predator, a rival group, or simply the cold creeping in unnoticed. So natural selection didn't favor humans who slept like stone. They favored humans who surfaced, who stirred, who checked the darkness briefly, registered nothing dangerous, and slipped back into sleep within minutes. That circuit is still running tonight, in you, right on schedule. It wasn't only individual vigilance that kept your ancestors safer in the dark either. Anthropologists studying communal sleeping arrangements in small-scale societies have noted that humans rarely slept alone and rarely slept in true silence. Bodies were close together. Someone, somewhere in the group, tended to be stirring at almost any given hour. That overlapping pattern of light, broken sleep across many people functioned like a rolling night watch nobody had to organize on purpose. Your solitary 2 a.m., alone in a quiet room, with no fire, no group, and no one else stirring nearby, is in some ways the strangest part of the whole setup. Your brain is still running the old vigilance software. It's just running it in an environment that no longer matches the one it was built for. Sleep scientist Charles Czeisler, who has spent decades at Harvard Medical School studying circadian rhythms, has shown exactly how sensitive that ancient circuit remains to one very specific cue: light. Even small amounts of light exposure in the evening, the cold glow of a phone screen 6 inches from your face, a streetlight slipping through a gap in the curtain, can suppress melatonin and shift your internal clock later than it wants to be. The result feels exactly like that ancestral middle-of-the-night waking, except now there's no second sleep waiting calmly on the other side of it. There's just you, your phone, and a slow building current of anxiety about being awake at all. Here's the actual twist. The thing modern culture has pathologized as a sleep disorder might be one of the oldest, most ordinary features of being human currently in existence. The crisis was never the waking. The crisis is what you do the moment after. Ancient humans who stirred in the night didn't reach for a glowing rectangle that told their brain, falsely, that it was daytime. They didn't lie there doing math about how many hours of sleep they supposedly lost, or scroll through everything they were going to feel exhausted for tomorrow. They simply existed in the dark for a while, awake, unbothered, waiting. No urgency attached to it, no self-judgment layered on top of it. You, on the other hand, treat that same waking as an emergency. You check the time, you calculate, you catastrophize about the meeting in 7 hours. And that anxiety, that very modern, very human layer stacked on top of an ancient and mostly harmless biological event, is often the actual reason you can't fall back asleep, not the waking itself. The story you tell yourself about the waking. There's even a name now for the particular flavor of this that technology has created. Sleep researchers call it orthosomnia, an unhealthy fixation on achieving perfect sleep, often driven by the very tracking apps and wearables marketed as the solution. You start monitoring your sleep so closely that the monitoring itself becomes the thing keeping you awake. A low score in the morning feels like a verdict on the entire day ahead. So you brace for poor sleep before you've even tried to fall asleep. And that bracing, that low hum of dread, makes the bracing come true. Your ancestors never had a sleep score to be disappointed in. They just had the dark and the fire and each other, and a culture that had no concept of bad sleep in the first place. What would happen if you stopped treating 2 a.m. like a malfunction? What if instead you treated it the way your ancestors treated that hour between first and second sleep? A pause built into the architecture of the night, not a problem to be solved before sunrise. Anthropologist Carol Worthman, who has studied sleep patterns across dozens of cultures over several decades, has made a point that sounds almost too simple once you actually hear it. The way humans sleep has always been shaped as much by culture and environment as by biology itself. There's no single, perfectly preserved, natural human sleep pattern hiding somewhere in your genes, waiting to be unlocked by the right mattress or the right supplement. There is a flexible system, refined over millions of years, that responds to firelight, moonlight, danger, safety, season, and company. Your ancestors didn't fight their nighttime waking, they simply lived inside it. Maybe that's the real lesson hiding in every restless night you've ever had.